Hi, fan. Do you mind? Hi, fans of high-quality entertainment. Welcome to my latest Beatles list. Now, this one is a little different. It's top 10, I don't even know how I'm going to title this, top 10 Beatles wish list or something like that. Things that, in a way, I wish history could have changed, I guess. And these aren't in any particular order. And in fact, I only had 9 up until I decided for number 10 would be the most obvious, which is, I wish John Lennon had never been murdered. And not that it would matter if the Beatles got back together again, but it would be nice, you know, just to see them together when, of course, George Harrison was alive too. Just all 4 of them together after their breakup, being friendly. That would have been nice. And now this one, it's more of a question to you Beatles fans out there, the real true Beatles fanatics, like Fit to be Tie-Dyed might know. And it's the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band's Runoff groove, you know, on the original vinyl, when it goes off of the record, and it's that crazy loop that could go on for eternity if you don't take the needle off. Just crazy, crazy sounds. And I had the original 1967 album when it came out here in Canada, the Canadian version of it. And I'm wondering if, I don't know, where is it on the Runoff groove? Is it right at the very end of the, you know, where the label is in there? Or is it when it's coming off? Because I certainly never heard it back in 1967. I'm wondering if maybe my needle automatically picked up the record when it was done, so it never got to that section of it. Or was it maybe not on all of the Beatles' original Sgt. Pepper releases, and just maybe in the United Kingdom or wherever? So that's more of a question. But I would have loved, speaking of history, for me to have heard that back in 1967. I mean, it was freaky enough with the ending of A Day in the Life, but to have that extra weird thing would have been cool. Because I didn't know anything about it until most likely the 80s or 90s. And speaking of Fit to be Tie-Dyed, his channel's on my front page of Canadian Studmuffin, so you should check him out if you're a Beatles fan. He goes into real depth of talking about Beatles records, vinyl mainly. But I asked him if he had the Get Back book that came, I think, with the United Kingdom and Canadian versions of Let It Be. I'm not sure about the States. Anyway, my brother bought Let It Be when it came out in 1970, and it came with the book. And I don't know if it was just the Canadian pressing, but the glue, the pages started to come out quite quickly. So, but I wish I had that Let It Be album with the book and kept it in pristine condition and still own it today, because I've never ever had my own copy. So that would have been cool. It's a wish. And couple of videos before this one, I did a Logan review at the end of meeting some fans video, and that was an excellent movie. But on the way out, they play Johnny Cash's Hurt, and you know, it's one of these big theaters with the excellent sound system, and it got me thinking, wouldn't it be kind of cool if they did a Beatles movie. I don't know how, if it would be animation or what, but just remix all of the Beatles songs and sit there and watch some sort of movie and listen to, because the theater has such amazing sound, and listen to the Beatles in the theater. I wonder if that day would ever happen. That'd be cool. And, of course, a lot of people want Let It Be to be released on Blu-ray. And I don't know, maybe they are working on it. And I know some people are thinking it's Paul McCartney holding back the release because he doesn't come off that well in the movie, getting kind of nasty with George Harrison. And maybe it's George Harrison that didn't want it released. I don't know. But it was released back in 1970, and so of course Paul McCartney and George Harrison must have had to approve it back then, and they did. So that might not be the reason. I don't know. But it would be nice to have that on Blu-ray with a lot of extra footage, of course. Another wish. Poor George Harrison. He really grew as a songwriter in the Beatles. And I wish that George Martin and John Lennon and Paul McCartney had given George at least one more song per album, maybe even two. For instance, on the White Album, as much as I love every song, they could have had George Harrison's Not Guilty in place of Why Don't We Do It in the Road, for instance. All Things Must Pass, I believe, was written around that time. That would have been nice on the White Album. And Only a Northern Song on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. So more George Harrison songs in the Beatles. And speaking of Sgt. Pepper, I know they're working on this new edition where they put in Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane, which were originally marked for Sgt. Pepper. But it would be nice to also listen to Carnival of Light. I actually have to look that up because I've heard of Carnival of Light, but I want to get more details about it because I don't know that much about it. I know it's a song I can't even really talk about it. I don't know that much about it. And I'm a Beatles expert. I'm not a Beatles expert, by the way. I just say I am. I just love the Beatles music. But it'd be nice if Carnival of Light was on Sgt. Pepper and Only a Northern Song and Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane. So I guess it would have been a double album maybe. That was supposedly the original intent. As much as I consider side 2 of Abbey Road the best album side of all time, and I love the way it ends. I've told the story more than once about Her Majesty. I was watching the vinyl spin round and round, and the end ended, and my needle didn't return. I'm looking at it, so I'm turning up the volume, and then of course Her Majesty. Almost had my first heart attack. But in a way, it would have been nice if Abbey Road ended with the end. What do you think? I don't know. 2 more. Peace and love, peace and love. As most of you know, Abbey Road was the final album the Beatles recorded. Although the Beatles' final release, original albums that were released were Let It Be. And it's too bad that Let It Be couldn't have been released first, and then Abbey Road was the last album. So there was no, because I'm sure there's some younger people that think because Let It Be came out in 1970, that was their last album recorded. And of course it wasn't. So it'd just be nice if those two were switched, and Abbey Road was definitely known as the last album released and recorded. And finally, the Beatles, when they were there mixing the albums, helping George Martin, giving suggestions, of course, they were working on the mono mixes of the album, because that's what they were all intended for, except for Abbey Road. And for the stereo mixes, I guess the Beatles, and I'm not even sure if was George Martin there, or just Jeff Emmerich, I'm not sure. I'd have to Google it. But with the stereo mixes, they were kind of just not taken as much care with them. They were kind of thrown together sometimes. And especially the earlier stereo mixes where John and Paul or George's vocals are on one side and some of the instruments are on the other side, and it's kind of annoying. It would have been nice if they'd taken more care back in the day with the stereo mixes, but of course they didn't know how popular stereo was going to be. And I guess this is an 11th wish. I really do hope at some point, soon hopefully, that all of the Beatles albums are remixed, like they were for the Yellow Submarine soundtrack a few years ago, which sounded awesome. And so, that's it. Those are my Beatles wishes. What are your Beatles wishes, and what do you think about the Beatles wishes I mentioned? Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.